know what exactly can be done about it. Let me just give some examples of the things people actually say, because many of them are, well, for example, one of the things I had a letter about in the New York Times was a piece that was in the arts and leisure section where someone said, Americans led the world and perhaps still do to the degree that we deny death. And I said I wondered what planet she was living on, because nearly every month I see a newspaper or magazine article that deals with death and dying and totes the fashionable hospices are good, high-tech care for the dying is bad line with about as much sophistication as the 4 legs good, 2 legs bad motto of Orwell's Animal Farm.
Yeah.
And I said what Americans are really remarkable for denying is that some dying people want to extend their lives by high-tech means, and that being, as the author of this article put it, locked in the cold metallic embrace of a life-sustaining machine like a ventilator is as compatible with being, quote, wrapped in the love of family as is writing articles with the aid of a cold word processor. I mean, of course you can have a rich, fulfilling life, even, I don't even like to say even here, if you're disabled. You know,
sure.
Mechanical aids are wonderful things.
Yeah.
But you see this a great deal in bioethics.
Mm-hmm.
And I really find it rather frightening.
Yeah, I guess I share your frightening share your sentiments there. Someone just asked also, since we're on the topic of some of these arguments, again, kind of in that theme early on here in the interview, about these secular arguments against life extension. And one I know that you covered before, but perhaps you want to review, is those who say that either there's going to be a risk of a class divide in the human population where rich are living forever and poor people are not, or that dictators and tyrants will rule the earth because they'll be able to live much longer now. Could you review that?
Yeah, I think those are very poor arguments. Let me take them one by one.
Yes.
David James gave the argument in the Hastings Center report about dictators. He was concerned about what he called the chilling prospect of power concentrated relentlessly into the hands of a few undying individuals, and particularly into the hands of tyrants. But of course, a parallel objection could have been made to any life-saving medical advance, such as chemotherapy and antibiotics. Surely a tyrant who dies of an infection at 30 will do less harm than one who lives vigorously into his 70s. But it seems cruel to object to medical advances simply for fear that such advances might prolong the active lives of some dreadful people. Moreover, a short lifespan is hardly an effective deterrent to tyranny, for one tyrant can replace another, and often does. Tyranny arises from a bad system and is most effectively prevented by a democracy, not by shortening people's lives.
Yes.
So I think that's one problem.
Yeah.
And the idea about inequality between the rich and the poor, this is not an issue of whether you're going to have a life extension technology, but of how it's going to be distributed. There is nothing inherent in life extension technology that prevents it from being distributed to everybody. In fact, as Ramaz Nan pointed out in his book, although many of these new innovations are expensive at the outset, they eventually become much cheaper and eventually will be available to people. And I thought that was a very good point. Notice also that there is, to some extent, a trickle-down effect, not as much as I would hope, but somewhat. Look at heart transplants, for example.
Right.
At the outset, they were available only to the rich. Now they're on Medicare and in some states on Medicaid.
Sure.
So I think that eventually these improvements benefit most people, and as a liberal, I think they should be made to benefit most people much faster. That is, I think we should have a national health system that makes them immediately available to the poor. But we really have to distinguish the question of whether we have advanced technology from whether we distribute it fairly. There's really no reason why it couldn't be distributed better.
Right, and isn't that one of the main points here as well, is that even if life extension technology goes to more wealthy individuals, that it's better at least to have that technology than to not do it at all based on that.
That's an additional point.
Oh,
I
okay.
would rather have everybody have it, but it's better to have some people have it than to have nobody have it, especially since eventually, as with most things that are developed technologically, most people do get it. Here is a quotation fact from Ramaz Nan in his book, More Than Human. The history of medical technology and its prices suggests reasons to believe that enhancement technologies could eventually become cheap. These are expensive to test, they're cheap to manufacture, so that after the initial research and development, few further investments can be made. Look at, for example, computers, which used to be only for huge corporations, and now most people have them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most people, and we've got computers in our pockets now, and I know mobile phones are expanding rapidly, even in the developing world, or less developed societies. They're so cheap, and I can see the argument that you're making there very clearly. Unfortunately, it seems a tough one to get through to people when arguing for life extension. At this point, I want to remind people, again, who are following along with the interview tonight, that if you do have some questions, and you can post them here in the text chat, and I will relay any good questions that I see. And I did get a question prior to the show, or someone who I don't know if was able to attend tonight, and I want to get to that, and that is, you're a professor of philosophy, and just for the audience knowledge, what type of philosophical stance do you do you favor materialism, dualism, pan-proto-psychism, or something else?
I suppose I favor dualism, but I want to stress that means that I think minds are logically independent of bodies, not that I think that disembodied minds are empirically possible.
Oh,
I do not think it is empirically possible to survive death, but that's not a philosophical view.
Okay, exactly. Okay, well, thanks for answering that. And does that philosophical stance shape your conception of death and life extension?
Not at all, really, because it leaves it open. That is, since I think that disembodied minds are logically possible, the issue of whether, in fact, you could survive death in a religious sense would be an empirical issue, and the empirical evidence seems to be vastly against it.
Sure. Okay. And this might be a somewhat related question from the audience here tonight. One fellow is interested in your view whether life extension research should somehow be limited or shaped for ethical reasons. And he goes
No, I think it should be widely extended as far as possible for ethical reasons to create the great good, the noblest goal of the world of enabling us to live longer.
And some people, such as Francis Fukuyama, would like research on human life extension, or say transhuman innovation, is what some people call it, for enhancing human abilities, to be limited, of course, for ethical reasons, and to perhaps preserve some form of human identity. And he argues that it would be the end of history if we somehow radically extend human lives and we enhance our abilities. What would you have to say to that?
I would quote Ray Kurzweil, who said that the essence of being human lies not in our limits, but in our ability to supersede our limitations.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. Boy, some members of the audience said the interview tonight is a breath of fresh air, because we've heard so much from Cass and Fukuyama and McKibben and so many of these that have argued against life extension. So I want to extend on behalf of the audience and myself that it is wonderful speaking with you tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, it's wonderful. And I also had another question here from prior to the show. Why do so many people fall into the false perception that sick and aged people do not value life enough to keep on living?
I think basically there are four reasons. One is just ignorance. They don't realize that these people can have lives that are desirable and lives that they can enjoy. They have no idea how many things you can actually do when you're on a ventilator, such as read, think. They should know, because after all they see Stephen Hawking, but they see him as exceptional, not just intellectually, but in other ways. They also are unaware of the evidence in studies from people like Marion Danis, Robert Gutman, Maurice Slavin, that terminally ill people are not really always as eager to die as society wants them to be. For example, Marion Danis found in a study that was published in Critical Care Medicine that the majority of a group of 244 patients with various serious illnesses wanted to receive a life-sustaining treatment that would prolong life for any length of time. Similarly, Robert Gutman, in his study of patients with advanced kidney disease, concluded that chronically ill people cherish their lives despite the appearance to outsiders of inadequate quality. I am, of course, not claiming that all seriously ill people feel this